Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado, although with all the people moving from California, it doesn't feel that way anymore. Colorado lost. Used to be a good place. How's everybody doing? You guys doing good? Having fun? Yeah. Starting to get some Wen Gogan comments, starting to get the Gogan after Rogan or Rogan after Gogan, all that cool stuff. I was just thinking it'd be fun to talk to all of you guys. And whenever I'm having an interesting day, I finally get off from work and I have a chance to actually get home and relax. There is nothing better in life than interacting with the community. I am just absolutely amazed that more CEOs and project founders don't do this. I mean, they have these great communities. So why not go and talk to them? Why not go and see them, see what's going on, get their comments, to get their concerns? We have the coolest community in all of cryptocurrency. And it is so nice to be able to just come home, turn on a video and say, hi, welcome. It's warm, sunny Colorado. Enjoy the masks, enjoy the paintings, enjoy my very flamboyant shirts that I wear from time to time. Although I am exempt from normal Hawaiian shirt mania because I grew up in Hawaii. I was born on the island of Maui, for those of you who don't know. Okay, we've let the questions saturate a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what you guys got for me. You ready? I have no idea how long this is going to go. I don't know where it's going to go. That's up to you. You can literally ask about anything, Cardano related or otherwise. I don't have to answer, but you sure as hell can ask. And hello to you too, John Hamilton from Texas. Texas is a beautiful place. Okay, let's see what we got here. So you got great questions like, will Cardano make me a millionaire in 5 years? Donald, do you honestly expect me to give you an actual answer to that? Any price related. So let's start this right now. If you ask a price related question, I will mock you. It's like today, we're a little bit down in the markets apparently. And then people are saying, oh no, it's going back to 4 cents. Oh God, what's going to happen? It's like, is this all you guys care about? Come on, let it go. I don't answer price related questions. I don't make price related speculations. Not my job. My job is to build the best ecosystem, best cryptocurrency in the world, bar none, and to make it useful and used. And you can connect the dots to whether that's something valuable to society or not. But it's not my job to make you rich. Never has been, never will be. And if you think that's the case, then you need to go buy some Tron. That's what they do. All right, let's get to serious shit. Shelli launch date. You should already know that if you've been paying attention. We did a whole episode on it. That reminds me, you see, I will answer your questions if your questions are new, but if your questions have already been answered previously, you need to pay attention. We have this thing called the product update. We do it every single month at the end of the month. Last product update, not only did we have a whole show dedicated to dates, we presented an exhaustive list of 9 deadlines, one of which we've already met today. And we announced that Shelli will ship either on June 30th or July 7th, depending upon the test that we do with the hard fork combinator the prior week. And we will do the hard fork on July 29th. So June 30th and July 29th are the pairing of dates to remember. The IT and ADA will be moved over August 3rd, because it takes 1 epoch to roll over, and then it takes a few epochs for all the staking mechanics to turn on, and the D parameter to decrement, and in which case actual staking will begin August 18th. So all those dates have been written. They're on my Twitter feed. Pay attention. All right. Can we log out of the Daedalus wallet? I cannot seem to log out. No. You turn it on and off. You secure it by using a spending password. That said, we've had some conversations about a login system, and that would make sense in the context of U2F, using some form of hardware authenticator. What does the Ergo connection mean? So for those of you who don't know, Ergo is an experimental blockchain project. There are some cryptocurrency projects that are intended to go conquer something, like Hydera Hashgraph. They're like, we will own business, or Fabric, we're going to be the permission chain, or Ethereum, we are the smart contract chain and we'll own all smart contracts, or EOS, we're the chain that takes all your money and doesn't give it back. But anyway, levity aside, every chain has a shtick. And so Ergo's shtick is that you have this incredibly brilliant team led by Alex Chirpino. He used to work with us and still occasionally publishes papers with us. And basically, he started with a project called Scorex, where he was saying, can I build a framework to construct cryptocurrencies? And in fact, 2 cryptocurrencies were launched, to my knowledge, from Scorex, probably more. Waves was launched, and Ergo was launched from it. But basically, Ergo is an experimental cryptocurrency to study concepts like non-outsourceable puzzles, which means you can't do mining pools. Things like Sigma protocols used in scripting. Things like proof of no pre-mine. Things like UTXO decay. So you can actually melt down small balance UTXO things. So a lot of these things that have been floating around in literature for a while, or Alex had come up with, basically he created something extremely interesting to go and play around with that. Now, it's a Russian project. It doesn't have a lot of marketing inside the United States and other areas, and it doesn't have the liquidity it really deserves. But what appears happens is that Emergo and Ergo got together, and they have some sort of JV where Emergo is going to list the Ergo token on the Yoroi wallet, making Yoroi a multi-asset wallet, and many more to come, I suspect. And basically, they're going to use Ergo as an experimental test bed to go and play around with a lot of concepts. So anything that they do there, it's basically at a low-risk place to experiment and play with, that if it's very successful, could work its way eventually into the Cardano ecosystem. So it's pretty exciting from that perspective. And we've invited the Ergo guys to come to the virtual summit, July 2nd, 3rd, and play around with Ergo. Now, Ergo doesn't do social physics, by the way. It's serious. You're thinking of Endor. But anyway, we've invited them to come to the IWHK summit, the virtual summit, Cardano virtual summit, to basically present on what is Ergo, what is the nature of the relationship with Emergo, and what's their view and what types of things will be deployed. So it's a very exciting project. I've always liked Ergo. It's very small. Market cap is only like 4.6 million or something, and very small community, but they're growing, and they're definitely good actors. And I love working with Alex. All the time we've spent together has always been productive. Mm-hmm. Have you started working out? No, I'm just fasting on and off, rotating 3 and 2 day fasts, and I'll get to the big one here in just a little bit. Charles, the logo on CoinMarketCap looks hideous. What have they done to it? I have no control over that. If they want to make things look hideous, that's their prerogative. Well, who owns them? Was that Tron or Binance? It was Binance who bought them. We like Binance. They're good guys. That's a good question. Instead of asking when moon, let's ask why moon. That's kind of like that Family Guy skit where they're like, instead of asking where's Waldo, you should have asked how is Waldo, because Waldo killed himself. That's great. Are you growing the beard to look like a wizard for the Shelli release? No, this is called living during the times of great quarantines. And yeah, I'm dealing with that. How do you handle the stress of being a CEO? That's actually a really good question. And it's a productive question for every single person who aspires to be an entrepreneur or finds himself in a position of power. So we're actually publishing a blog, internal and external, on culture. And I'm writing the foundational, the launching blog post for the blog. And we talk about the values that we have as a company, from integrity to listening and so forth. And I encourage all of you to read that once it's out. We're still working on it. I wrote the first draft, and now people have the luxury of getting out their red pens and reminding me that my prose sometimes leaves something to be desired, but usually I polish it enough. But anyway, the point is that you have to do three things when you're in a position of leadership. First, you have to do the job. So every role that's leadership related, and so CEO, there are three duties of a CEO: sustainable revenue, manage existential risk, and make sure there's a succession plan. So if you ever go away, there's somebody to replace you. It's the only three things you have to do as a CEO. Everything else is in somebody else's job, and you can choose to go into that lane. A lot of CEOs do, like Jobs was kind of a chief product officer and the CEO at the same time. Some CEOs are CTOs. I served in that role for a long time until we hired Romaine. But anyway, you still have to do that. So that's number one. You have to manage those duties that job is incumbent to have. And then second, you have to preserve and protect and grow the culture of the organization that you belong to. Every organization has culture, and it forces you to act and think in certain ways. If you join the U.S. Army, it's a very different culture than if you join Google, which is a very different culture than if you join, pick your favorite not-for-profit organization, UNICEF or something, who knows, something that is, humanitarian. Okay, so all of these things have different types of people, different cultures, different way you interact with people, different boundaries, if you will, different risks and so forth. And you have to be a member of that and focus on the good parts of it and make sure that you are always vigilant against the bad parts of it. And then finally, you have to do all that while not falling apart, because you'll probably be under constant criticism. Some environments are harsher than other environments. And some jobs naturally are just more stressful because you work longer hours and you have to do more difficult things. So the question is, how do you manage that in a way that you don't go crazy? Now, many of you have known me for years because I've been floating around these videos and going to conferences and all these things. And you've seen me from time to time in a good mood, and you've seen me from time to time in very bad moods and very pissed off. You've also seen the effects of trolling on me from time to time, or situations I consider profoundly disrespectful, like the MetaMask incident, for example. So there's been a lot of back and forth there, and there's been a lot of these things. And how do I manage to keep cool and keep with all of it? Well, there are a few things I do. One, I meditate. Mindfulness is great, and there's tons of people like Ron Siegel and the Calm app and other things that basically give you a paint-by-number, step-by-step way of doing that without the metaphysical import. What do I mean by metaphysical import? Is meditation and mindfulness tends to be contaminated with metaphysics. You tend to have this whole, you'll reach enlightenment, inner peace, and be at grace and one with the universe if you do these things. And whether that's true or not, it turns out you can meditate without that goal. You can simply just meditate to recover. It's kind of like saying that your job has a corrosive impact emotionally and a corrosive impact mentally. The longer you do it, the more damage it does to you. So meditation is like lifting weights for your brain. It's like doing things to clear out that junk and get you healthier, to exercise and prevent that damage from becoming permanent or undo damage that was permanent. So meditation, hugely important, hugely important. Second, you have to take the time to take a break. No matter how important things are, a lot of things can be pushed to tomorrow. And lately, I've been spending a lot more time with friends and family. Lately, I've spent a lot of time meditating, just being at the ranch. Today I'm picking radishes. Every morning I go out, have my coffee, sit and watch the sun rise. And I always make sure I catch a sunset with the people I love and care about. These moments don't take a lot of time, but they're incalculably valuable, and you don't get them back if you lose them. So that alone helps tremendously. And third, I think in addition to meditation and exercise and just good old-fashioned living, techniques like fasting and so forth that really do help you out, and taking the time to really enjoy your friends and family, you have to be inspired by the work that you do. So the first two techniques allow you to survive a job that's tough, that you love. There is nothing in the world that will allow you to survive a job that is tough, that you don't love. No one can survive that. A friend of mine wanted to be a surgeon. He thought he wanted to be a surgeon and went and did that and finished residency. 2 years out, he stopped being a surgeon, and now he's doing something else in life because he turned out that he didn't like the job. And so he'd done all the work, went to medical school, went through a 5-year residency program. That's a lot of work. And, 11 years to get to that point. And then he woke up one day and said, I can't do this for 20 years, 30 years. There's nothing I can do to change the nature and dynamics of this job to make it work for me. So he left, and he's never been happier. Lost a lot of weight, skin looks better, healthier, just happy, laughing with friends, doesn't have a care in the world. So that's the final point, is you can do things to keep yourself going, and when it's tough and you love it, but if it's tough and you don't love it, there is nothing you can do in the long term, just like a bad marriage or just like a bad relationship, that will allow you to survive it. Now, if you're the CEO, oftentimes there are reasons why you don't love your job. If you are surrounded by toxic people or a toxic work environment, a toxic culture, if you are surrounded in a toxic industry, the best thing you can do is reform that, even if it means you substantially reduce the short-term profitability of your organization, even if it means you damage the treasury of your organization, you lose key assets or key employees. Because at the end of the day, you'll just be so much more productive. You'll be so much friendlier, nicer, love your life more, that whatever you lose in the short term, whatever your company loses in the short term, it makes it back with a factor of 10 in the back end, in the long term. I had to learn that lesson the hard way. And I got into business with a lot of people that were competent, some cases incompetent. And I thought, well, I can make it work. And I kept doing everything I could to make it work. And literally got to a point where I would stand at the door of my office before I went into the office, because there's sometimes people there that I didn't want to talk to. And I would wait a few seconds before I'd open the door, take a deep breath and say, okay, it's time to go to work. I hated my job that much. And eventually we got rid of those people. They retired or moved on, or we had to let them go. And ever since that day, it's gotten a lot better. Life's a lot better. I'm a lot happier. So I suppose that's the fourth hidden point, that you have to love your job, and you have to, no matter if it's hard or not, there are ways to manage the hardness. But if you don't love your job, oftentimes it's because you're in a toxic environment. And so you got to fix that culture, even if that costs you a lot of time, effort, money. It's a first-class citizen with success. There's never been a case in the history of successful companies where a successful company has been successful despite its culture. It's been successful despite having toxic people. These companies never last. They fracture into 1,000 pieces. Because what keeps them together? Why would people want to be loyal? Mm-hmm. All right, let's see what else you guys got. Humble Drew asks, who do you recommend to study meditation from? Just download the Calm app. That's it, Calm. It's on cell phone, Android, iOS, these things, and super cheap, super easy, very fun to use. How will Cardano be funded once the contract ends in 2020? We will have a treasury. And just you wait. We have a lot to say about that. And I won't say it today, but I think you guys will be very happy with it. By the way, I've noticed that certain former community members are creating their own Reddits and, deciding how they're going to break off from our community with their 27 members in their Reddit, 4 active last time I checked. This is the amazing thing about blockchain governance and how things work. You can just literally do everything. You can write every paper, every line of code. You can present a vision, fund the vision, go out and build something special, get everybody, or at least the most people, on board. And then there's this 1 or 2 just really nasty people. And then you say, look, you got to calm down. And of course, their ego is so powerful that they can't ever be the problem. You're the problem. And then they have to leave and then go and take their ball and go home and start something else. Governance is hard, guys, because people are hard. People are difficult. People are arrogant. People are narcissistic. People don't want to admit their mistakes and their flaws. People don't want to look in the mirror. They want to blame somebody else. It's why U.S. is falling apart. It's why all these democracies are falling apart, because people, to solve these problems, have to admit that the problems exist. because of them in addition to others, not just others. And they're perfectly comfortable with the others are at fault problem, but they're not willing to admit their own faults. So you can never really get anywhere, because even if those people fix everything on their side, you still have a deficiency. It's like saying there's a boat and two people have to row and only one person's rowing. You can't make it go by yelling at the other person and saying row harder and row faster. They're like, well, what about you? You have to row too. And unfortunately, that's where we're at with certain people in our community. Not many of them. It's a very radically small minority. And you see this everywhere. I saw it with Bitcoin. I saw it with every other cryptocurrency here and there. And, you just get through it and you work your way through it. But it is a good lesson of why you cannot completely solve governance and why you can never create a completely stable system. These systems are intrinsically unstable and require constant vigilance to maintain against the perils of social entropy. Any updates on the Harvard partnership with the Berkman Klein Center? We do not have a partnership with Harvard. It's very difficult, if possible at all, to have Harvard partner with you. You can give them money as a donation, and I believe the foundation did do that, or at the very least intended to do that. But even then, they tend to have a huge ego attached to it, which is why my organization, Input Output, has never given money to Harvard or any of these Ivy League schools. We consider Cornell, for example. They told us to pound sand. Our money wasn't good enough for them. So we went and built the largest cryptocurrency research center in the world at University of Edinburgh, or at least in all of the UK. And by publication and citation volume, it's the most productive research center in the world for cryptocurrencies. And I believe by peer review, it's also the most productive. Cornell could have had that, but our money wasn't good enough for them. So it's difficult dealing with Ivy League schools. They don't need you because they have gigantic endowments. They have the prestige. They have feedstock of endless amounts of brilliant students, and they will always have great publication output. And when you go there, you just take a number and then you deal with the bureaucracy, and then occasionally student politics turn against you. And then if you're labeled inconvenient, you get pushed out, no matter what you've accomplished and how many names you have on the buildings. So it's much, 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 much better to build relationships and partnerships with tier 2 organizations that are hungry, up and coming, and want to build a brand and a reputation, because they're willing to work with you as a partner and realize that you are providing jobs for their students when they graduate, and they realize that you're providing publication opportunities for their students and professors so that they can get publications and sculpt the growth of an emerging industry and field. And so that's why we love, for example, working at the University of Wyoming. This is why we love working at the University of Athens, why we love working with Edinburgh. These are universities that we've never had administrative or bureaucratic problems with. Occasionally, there's some things we have to negotiate and figure out, but it's easy and it makes sense. And we don't have difficult phone calls. It's more of a question about priorities. It's more of a question about, well, are we going to fund these graduate students or not? Or how do we get this person here? Can we open up a postdoc for this? And then what value are we providing? It's like, well, we're hiring people. We're doing industrial research. We're bringing some of the brightest minds in the world to sit and work on some of the hardest problems. And a lot of cases, we do a lot of interinstitutional publications, like our game theory research is done out of Oxford. And that's directly collaborating with our people in Edinburgh. So it means the graduate students at that university get to work with people at Oxford. That's an amazing opportunity. And it's a rare opportunity for someone so young in their academic career to work on things that have real life value, be very meaningful, and to have these interinstitutional, interdisciplinary papers, which have a high probability of being accepted for peer review. And all the research is open source and it's usable by the entire world. And oftentimes it's cited by everybody. Our Ouroboros paper, I think, cited more than 800 times. So, that's the way we look at these things. And that's why I don't tend to build very strong relationships with those centers of excellence, because I don't think they are. I think that the research they do is quite strong and quite good. And there's a lot of brilliant people there, but you can find brilliant people anywhere. And you need the right culture that's sustainable and it's going to work well. That said, we do have people on the other side who do work in there. And like Nathan Kaiser, for example, the chairman of the Cardano Foundation, is a fellow at the Berkman Klein Center, and he does very good work there. And there are other people we talk with, and we like working with them. They're very nice. Berkman Klein in particular isn't quite like Harvard. It's like the Harvard extension in that they're much more open, accessible, and independent from the normal Harvard bureaucracy. So they're kind of the rebels within the organization. So it is a lot of fun to work with them in that respect, where and when it makes sense and it's possible. And when we find things, we do things. But my personal view and why our company puts its money where it does is that there's better value elsewhere. Also, especially if you're investing in the frontier, you usually can get states to match funds. That's what happened in Wyoming. We put in $500,000 and magically it turned into 1.3 million. It would be the opposite direction if we gave money to Harvard. So how would you rather me spend project capital? Places where it turns into $2 or $3 for every dollar we spend, or places where it turns into 40 cents or 30 cents, and the rest of it goes to gender studies. I think it makes a lot more sense to spend it where it has the highest impact. But reasonable people can disagree, and that Cornell group that didn't want to take our money has been also one of the most productive groups around. They created Snow White. They published Avalanche. Ava has now come out of that group. There's some very good people there, and I have a lot of respect for the research that they do. Tell us about the offline wallet hardware you're developing. When do you anticipate ballpark they will be deployed? If you're speaking about the hardware at University of Wyoming that we're developing, it's going to be years before any of that hits market. If you're speaking about the hardware center that's going to be in Daedalus, that's imminent. And Darko will make some sort of statement about that for the Daedalus flight program. And we should have full ledger support for Daedalus before the end of the month. Greetings for Greece. Yes. I love Greece. If all the Cardano stake pools were to suddenly catastrophic failure go offline, would individual Daedalus wallets automatically be able to keep the network going? Everything goes to a halt, and that's called graceful failure. So if you don't have enough consensus to progress the system stays in a frozen state until it's restored. And there's ways to reboot the network, and it doesn't really take a lot of effort to do that. But there is no reality where all stake pools are going to suddenly catastrophically go offline because there's just simply too many of them. That's the point of decentralization, is that you get resilience with that. Greetings from Colorado. Yeah, it's nice here. It's a little windy, though, earlier today. What will be the next big release after Shelli? Multi-asset, followed by Goguen. We're going to stagger them. And if you're interested about native multi-asset, our view of how to do ERC20 and ERC721, we'll do that presentation at the virtual summit July 2nd. So we're going to have a whole discussion and 2 papers on how we do native assets. And they're actually being integrated into the ledger as I speak. So they'll come out shortly after Shelli. Hello from Toronto. Many good friends in Toronto. Hi, Charles. Greeting from Broomfield. I'm a doctor and covered events at Metro State. Yeah, that was my old alum. First started studying math there. Then I went to CU Boulder after I finished at Metro. My brother went to Metro too. He graduated with a degree in psychology. Then he became a nurse at Regis. He did the 1-year BSRN, and he was a ICU nurse. Then he got tired of doing that, so he went to Rocky Vista and became a doctor. And he just finished not too long ago an internal medicine residency, and now he works up in Gillette, Wyoming. We got a lot of doctors in the family, mostly internists. Excuse me. Love Metro, but right when I left, they built a new science building. The old one was like so old it had like Jimmy Carter stickers on the laboratory equipment. It was nice being a Metro student because you just really felt like you were sticking it to the man. You were going against the wind. Justin Fujimoto asks, how happy are the restaurant employees after you tipped 100%? I don't know because I do it in a way that they don't know until after I've left. I write it, turn the receipt over, and they only find after they bust a table. So I don't stick around to see it. I imagine it's a pretty good surprise. But the whole point of that is that there are so many people who have the means to be able to do it, but they don't. And it just perplexes me. These waiters and waitresses are the hardest hit in the crisis. So many have lost their jobs. They live paycheck to paycheck, and they've had no paychecks that are meaningful for 3 months. So they're finally back to work. They have to wear masks and gloves. They're exposing themselves to people who could be sick. And what, with a $20 bill, you're going to give them $4. You're going to give them $20 if you have the ability to do that. It helps them out. And of course, people are so cynical and just so stuck up in their ways that when I post the receipt, they say, "Oh, you have no humility. How dare you? You should, giving should be silent." It's like the whole point of doing this is to convince other people to do it. Can I tell them secretly? Can I like PM all the rich people, say, do this? Come on, I have 120,000 followers. It's the most direct way to try to create something viral. This is very confusing. I'm talking about the tips. I missed your prior comment, message up. I did the same thing when I was in Japan. They were very angry at me, Charles. You can't tip them in Japan. They get angry when you tip them. It's like an insult or something. I don't know. Japan is a strange place. I truly love it, but I will never understand it. I'm just a guest, and I never forgot that. What's in the mug? Coffee. Black coffee. On Rick and Morty, which Beth is the real Beth? That's a very good question. I guarantee Wisecrack will do a video about that, and it'll be on the Squanch, and they'll be talking about it. I haven't had a chance to watch that. For those of you who don't know, that was the final episode of season 10, where, much to my surprise, they revisited the Beth clone plotline from season 3, episode 7. Anyway, it's not clear which of the Beths is the clone Beth, the warrior Beth or the stay-at-home Beth. But regardless of which one, it was a very good episode. I quite enjoyed it. Although lately, Rick has been getting his ass kicked. He got kicked up by Phoenix Man, and he also got Phoenix Person, PP, and he got beaten up by that Zeus wannabe. So I think they're trying to say something about Rick. Do you think a unified field theory will be discovered? No, probably not. The minute you have one, you'll need something else. Charles, a lot of people keep talking about how Shelli and how it was delayed. All right, Garlash, you tell me what exactly are they talking about? We've been pretty explicit about that. What's the point? Come on. What do you want to litigate the past? We've already talked about it. Shipping. When it's shipping, what's your problem? People The minute we ship it, then it's not enough. The price doubles. Oh, why is the price going down 10 cents, 10%? Oh no. Oh God, what do we do? The markets are over. Why? It's never enough. It's never enough. Don't chase fame. Don't chase love. Don't chase the moment. Chase principles and stick to them. Chase goals and build things over a long period of time. You will always have criticism. You will always have somebody who shows up after you've done something amazing and said it's not good enough. Tom Brady wins a Super Bowl, the greatest Super Bowl victory of all time, the greatest comeback of all time. The next season, they say he's washed up. He wins another one. He's washed up. He's going to Tampa Bay. Still going to be washed up, right? Even if he wins, it'll be the greatest comeback of all time. The next season, he's a nobody. No one loves you, okay? Because they don't love themselves. And if you don't love yourself, you can't love others. People love you. True love is when it's unconditional. They just love you because you're a person. You exist. You deserve love, regardless if you're great or not great. If you're weak, you're strong. They just love you for love's sake. And they feel that connection. They say you deserve as a human being to be acknowledged, listened to, and have empathy and sympathy for your plight and conditions. If they love you for the things you do are hollow and finite, hedonic amnesia. People just forget all about it over time. It just disappears. So yeah, price went way up, double, triple, went down a little bit. Oh no, the sky is falling. Everybody's a scam. It's all bad. Say it all goes back. It goes back to $1. Why not $2? Goes to 80 cents from $1. Why not $1.20? It's like you can't win. We released the great papers. The papers aren't enough. It's just a wallet. You release Shelli, and it will have the most decentralized cryptocurrency. Why don't you have smart contracts? We'll have smart contracts. Well, why don't you have this? We'll have that. Why don't you have that? And then even after all of that, it's not growing fast enough. Change of leadership is necessary. We need something else. I mean, just look at the bloody iPhone, for God's sakes, or the Samsung Galaxy. I mean, these things, guys, are marvels of human ingenuity, progress, and engineering. They really are. You're talking about the world's most sophisticated battery technology, antenna design, touchscreen. Every part of the material science is so carefully thought out. You have brilliance on so many different levels about the microprocessors, the RAM, and all of it's put together into one of the most usable computers ever conceived at a below $1,000 price point. And yet, it's not enough. The minute a new one comes out, Galaxy S11, now, the new thing, the Note's coming out. Oh, it's all garbage. The old iPhone, it's garbage. The new one's coming out. Because this is the consumerism mentality that we've been trained to have, is that we aspire for the thing that comes. And when that comes, we no longer desire it and we ignore it. And it's no longer meaningful and we let it go. And we want the next thing that's coming. Even though the thing that came could potentially be life-changing. And we could have it for 100 years and it would provide utility, value, and joy every single year. The best gift I ever got when I was a kid was a pen and a notepad, because I could draw on it. I could write things in it, and I could do whatever I wanted to do with it. There was no way to improve that experience. I couldn't get a better pen or a better notepad. It wouldn't change anything. And with that, I planned out all kinds of things. I still have notepads and pens, even though I have all these computers, and I still use them for things. And I planned Cardano out on a notepad. I still have that notepad that I planned Cardano out on, the original notes from 2015. I still have the original pen that I used. I kept them as mementos. How do I improve on that? There's nothing that can be invented that's a better experience than that. Charles, longtime listener, first-time caller. Well, welcome, new Meteo. You're saying, can exchanges vote and participate in governance with the ADA and exchange wallets? Not really. The way that we're going to set it up is there's going to be some sort of freezing mechanism where you have to lock the tokens for a period of time in order to be eligible to vote for the next voting round. And because exchanges are on-demand accounts, which means that exchanges have to be able to provide your money when you request it, for regulatory reasons, it's a bit difficult for them to be able just to lock your funds. That's why banks use CDs and things like that. So that should resolve a great amount of of stake voting through exchanges. Occasionally, you'll still see it every now and then, but it means that they're actually violating a regulation. If you're particularly concerned about it, make sure that you don't use an exchange as a wallet, that you actually are in control of your own funds. There's only so much I can do as a system architect to be able to prevent these things. Because remember, it's difficult to distinguish between an exchange address and a regular address. Because what happens if you just happen to have a high volume address for a DApp? It would look very similar to a mid-sized exchange. And then if the exchange addresses were somehow forensically identifiable, then they would just start obfuscating them through different transaction patterns. And so the only way we'd be able to do that is through manual intervention. Then you have this whole thing that lives up on top of the system, and then your EOS. It's not a good deal. Charles Hoskins, Duncan Coots, a full-time employee of IHK or consultant. Does he have a long-term commitment to Cardano development? He's been around for years. He actually owns his own company, Well-Typed. He's the CTO of that company. I think the only way we could ever probably coax him to being part of my company is to buy Well-Typed, and I don't think it's for sale. Duncan just does his own thing, but he's a genius, and we love working with him, and he's not going anywhere. There's a lot of work to do. And it's a great and productive relationship for both of us because in addition to working on Cardano, Duncan has the opportunity to work on Haskell and Haskell infrastructure. And what we've really done is created the first true Haskell infrastructure that's usable on Windows with a good user experience on Windows that's mainstream and mass market. So if this works, it pushes the entire ecosystem and his philosophy of engineering forward. So that's what we call a win-win. But Duncan does his thing, and we keep him comfortable as much as we can. Was the Forrest Fenn treasure chest hunt legit? That's a good question. There's a reason why a lot of states have laws that prevent anonymous winning of lotteries. It's because you need to actually see the winner to verify that the winner was legitimate. Otherwise, you can just say someone won, keep the money for yourself. It's quite unfortunate that he didn't announce the winner. It would be a good story. And the fact that the winner stayed anonymous means that the whole thing could have been a hoax. And if it was, I will remind everybody that 4 people died searching for that chest. A really nasty hoax. Yeah, Charles is like Phil Jackson. Yeah, without all the ex-wives. Charles, can you make an update on the New Balance partnership? We did a pilot run for the Kawhi Leonard shoes. They ship with the boxes, and we're negotiating to see if we can do more products. It's ebb and flow. Consumer products aren't moving right now, so most companies are scaling back discretionary research spending and R&D, and they're scaling back luxury goods. Had coronavirus not hit, I think that would have been accelerated quite a bit. But we're finishing out that commitment, and it's New Balance's decision if they want to do another production run or scale it up. We obviously would love to scale it up, as would Tangem, because it obviously gives us a revenue stream for that. But we learned a lot from the relationship, and we liked working with New Balance. Favorite band, Pink Floyd. Absolutely amazing. All right, let's see what else we got here. What do you mean it was shipped with the shoes? Yeah, it was a Tangem card that was actually put into the boxes along with the shoes, and then you paired them together after you bought them. Yeah, so this is a good question right here. Is Africa your primary focus for Cardano? There is no primary focus for Cardano. Cardano is an open protocol. It's like saying, what's the primary focus for TCP/IP? Our focus as a company is the developing world and the underserved, the people who do not have economic identity. It's about 3 billion of them. They live all across the world, from America to Africa. Certainly, there's more of them in Africa than there are in the United States, but this recent financial crisis has created millions of people in poverty who no longer have bank accounts or access to sufficient financial services. Some communities in the United States are poorer than African cities. Okay, so it's a stereotype to say that Africa is helpless and America is strong. It's not true. Everything is one of those it depends situations. So what we focus on are those who don't have an economic identity, and we work with them to try to create one. Now, Cardano's open protocol, Ergo does work in it. The ambassadors do work. The dApp developers will do work. The pioneers are now doing work. And every single person has their way of using that infrastructure for their own good or their own community's good. Sometimes it's strictly humanitarian. Sometimes it's strictly for profit. And sometimes it's a lot in between. And the beauty of open systems is you don't have to ask for permission to do that. You just use it. And my job is to make it as useful as possible. And your job is to use it to do things. How good is the summit video that you liked? It was a moment for me as a CEO, a profound moment for me as a CEO. And I saw it, I watched it. It was less than a minute, I think. And it just blew me away. I put my cup down and I had the feels. I had the feels, like almost tears in my eyes when I saw it. Anyway, I hope we can get it out this week. We'll launch it with the website for the summit. But man, it was special. It was very special. I think you guys will know it's special when you see it too. You'll feel it. I really like the albums after Roger Waters left. You're not alone on that. There's certainly some opinions about that. Although my favorite album was Wish You Were Here. That's why I have the album cover right there. What's your personal connection to Africa and its culture? None. I've spent a lot of time there, and I've come to know the African people, whether they be Ghanaians or Ethiopians or people from South Africa, but I don't have any direct connection. You know, people like to appropriate things. You know, I recently saw all these Democrats kneeling with some traditional Ghanaian clothing on, and they're like, "Yeah, we're here with solidarity." It's like, do you even know what that clothing you're wearing means? It's like you're wearing something that represents one particular tribe in Ghana, and this is supposed to be a representative example of all Black people in America, all Africans. I don't even understand what you're doing. It's like, guys, it's just pathetic. Stop it. You are not Black. You do not understand Africa. You're not there. Stop trying to do that. Go there, spend time with people, work with them, build businesses there. If you truly cared, where are the businesses? If you truly cared, why aren't you there? Even George Bush went there and painted homes, started the PEPFAR project, saved millions of lives. And we wouldn't consider him humanitarian of the year, would we? I mean, the whole point is practice what you preach. Don't tell people how you're saving the world. Don't tell people how you're so great or how you stand with them. Just do it. Just stand with them. Just go and solve the problem. Just go and talk to them and say, hey, what is impacting your community and how can I help? Is there anything I can do? Is there any way we can make money together? Is there any way we can build something together? And just go do that. And if you go do that, things get better. And if you talk about how you're going to do it, things never get better. There's a nice little distinction between these two things. So I don't have a connection to Africa in that I was born there or I grew up there or, I was married to an African woman or something. I don't have that connection. There's nothing there. It's just that I said this continent has some of the best economic opportunities in that not only can I make money, I can make money by making money with other people and having both sides win. You have all kinds of ways you can think. Wall Street, win, lose, traders. I make money because I took it out of another trader's pocket. I did a good deal. Somebody on the other side of it did a bad deal. Some zero came to me. Oftentimes that's the thinking. You talk about being an entrepreneur, building wealth up. You say, I go and invest somewhere. I build it up. The people here, they get wealthier, and then they can be better customers. They can work with me, and their lifestyle improves. They get better education, better health care. They don't have to worry about bad water or whatever. And because wealth has been constructed, they can do more. They have more capacity, more economic identity. Then I benefit from that because I own some of that infrastructure. They're my customers in that respect. That's a win-win. So always, 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 always think win-win. How do we build things in a way that I win only if the other person wins? Then everybody has an incentive to work together. Everybody has an incentive to keep things going. Everybody has an incentive to be honest with each other. We all want the deal to work. You know, it's like if you're a famous quarterback and you really wanted to be on the Denver Broncos, and you go to them and say, guys, I want to end my career here. You want me? I want to end my career here. Let's make a deal that works for both of us. Both sides want the deal to work. So they'll go and negotiate something that's fair and find a way to make it work for them. So that's what you do, right? And if you do that, it gets better for everybody. Everybody's happier. Life is better for everybody. And you just move on. But I just can't stand people that culturally appropriate things. I really can't. I can't stand for people to say, oh, I stand with solidarity, or I'm part of this, or I'm a member of this culture. I'm a cultural nomad. I grew up in Hawaii. I've lived in Switzerland and Japan, all across the United States. I've been in the deep South to the frontier. I got a farm. So some days I wake up and I pretend to be a rancher. And then I go to New York City and I hang out at cigar bars there, pre-quarantine. So it's like, you tell me what the hell I am. I'm all over the place in terms of these things. So I have no home in that respect. But what I do have is this desire to just work with people and help people. And oftentimes the poorest people in the world are the ones that if you help, you get the most reward. If not money, then in just goodwill. Can we incentivize news outlets to be less polarizing? This is something that is directly connected with our industry. Journalists do not have incentives in any respect to write honest stories. They don't have incentives in any respect to write in-depth investigative journalism, and they don't have incentives in any respect to write stories that don't fit into a predefined political agenda. If you work for the Daily Wire or Breitbart or Fox News, there is going to be a conservative slant in everything you're allowed to talk about, or else it just won't get published. If you find an article that's damaging for the Republican of the week that is not on the hit list, so Mitt Romney's okay, but Trump is not, for example, then you're not allowed to publish, or at least your publication will be much lower on the stack, or else you're called a pariah. And it's the exact same for MSNBC, CNN, CNBC, CBS, these guys. They live in that this versus that, tit for tat, narrative journalism culture. Okay? Narrative journalism. We have a narrative. We want to broadcast that narrative. Doesn't matter if it's true. Doesn't matter if it fits reality. This is the narrative. Adhere to it. Because at the end of the day, it's entertainment. At this point, it's kayfabe. It's world wrestling. It's like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and Jake the Snake and Macho Man Randy Savage and these other people. And you're watching like, who's going to win WrestleMania? Who's going to win? What's going to happen? Oh, somebody just entered the ring with a chair. Oh, no, what's going to happen? Are they going to pull this one out? It's storytelling. Now, we all know it's fake, but the people involved pretend that it's real and they never break character. News media has become wrestling. Okay, you might as well hire Vince McMahon to run these things. That's why we have a reality TV show guy as our president. Was that accidental? No, he's just the best at that world that has been created by these organizations. So how do you change it? You don't change it by saying be better. You don't change it by saying be honest. You say make a different model where people can make more money being honest and doing real journalism than doing the narrative kayfabe crazy shit that they're doing today. That's one dimension of it. The other dimension is that the distribution rails are being controlled and curated and censored. And it's very deeply disturbing to me. There's a reason why Joe Rogan moved to Spotify. And by the way, no media coverage, just like 3 stories. Oh, look, he made $100 million. That was the story. Joe Rogan makes $100 million for moving to Spotify. The story should have been, guy got so fed up with YouTube censorship, soft censorship, and threats of censorship and demonetization that he had to leave an open platform to go to a different platform and took the best deal he could find. Guy's got 20 to 30 million people listen to him every week, which means he's the single most popular source of long-form news in the entire United States, if not the entire world. Okay? So love him or hate him, Rogan is an enormous voice that people pay attention to, and not for 30-second snippets, not for an hour-long segment that's tightly curated with visuals and flashiness like the O'Reilly effect or something. No, they listen to him for hours on end while driving a forklift, while being a long-haul trucker, while stocking shelves, while in the back cooking in the restaurant, okay? And the wealthy people in their beautiful homes on a treadmill, they put the earbuds in, they listen to this guy. The rich, the poor, the young, the old, the educated, the non-educated, they all listen to this guy. He's a humongous force that has given a platform to so many people that are not in the mainstream. And he's mostly ignored by the entire media and treated in such a way that he has to go to Spotify and make a deal just to be able to get out of that environment that was becoming increasingly more toxic. I mean, it's like the most popular live stream on YouTube, not trending, never trending. Why? Because they didn't like the particular guest that he has on. It's insanity. It's absolute insanity. And then the media descriptions of him: a comedian, an entertainer, a Republican. Whoa, Joe Rogan? A racist. He gave a platform to racists. It's insanity. They can't even label a guy correctly. So you have to change the distribution rails. Trump's censorship on Twitter is a great example of another problem with these rails. The audacity and arrogance of a platform to say it is our duty to censor the politicians of the world leaders. So isn't that the point of the ballot box? We, the people, get to decide whether these leaders are credible or not. They have power. This man can end the world with nuclear weapons. Yet some people at Twitter say it is a good idea for us to step in and start deciding what's true and what's not true with political forces. So now he has to do that for every single politician in every single country that uses his platform. If somebody in Accra says something, they now have to understand, is that true or not true? Or else, by their own standards, they have a double standard. If Macron from France says something offensive about the Algerians or about the protesters in France in French, they have to have a guy who makes a call on that. And every time you censor one of these politicians, they now become the enemy of the platform. It is an endless Pyrrhic war that cannot be won, because it's not the job of these platforms to censor people. And they say, but we're private companies. They're really not anymore. They're utilities. We trust these things to be our source of news. We trust these things to be our livelihood and income. And just because they're under private custodianship, it's like saying, what if all the trains and buses in your country are owned by private companies and they just make a decision no Jews can ride the trains? Would anybody be okay with that? Would they make a decision that if they don't like the things that you say, you can't ride the buses in your country? They say, oh, but it's a private bus. Deal with it. You say, but that's the only bus. That's the only platform. I can only get to work that way. Oh, I'm so sorry. Only deal with it. So here's how you solve the problem: by transcending it. You have to get the rails that these things live on off of private ownership and into the world of protocols, just like payment rails. That's why the killer app for cryptocurrencies was money, because we had to build a settlement and clearing system at the same time. We had to build our own banking system at the same time. So people couldn't use the settlement and clearing systems and the banking system to shut people out. If your business was inconvenient, you're an arms dealer, you sell pot, suddenly you're unbanked. You can't settle. You can't accept anything but cash. Now we have an independent system that does not care if you're selling marijuana or you're selling alcohol or you're selling children's stories. It's all treated equal in terms of its access to the marketplace, and then society decides what's good and bad, and they have other systems for that. Similarly, social media needs to move to a distribution platform that is decentralized and open. Then we build businesses and curations and other things on top of that. And then community curation is how we get to where we need to go. Micro tipping is one of the greatest examples of that and will be the killer app within 10 years in our industry. If you like what I have to say, you click a button and it costs you 0.001 pennies. But if I have 10 million people in my audience, every time I do a live stream, I'd make $100,000 or something like that. If they keep tipping every time they hear a good comment, each individual, it's nothing to them. Okay. That's why models like bats are so interesting and other things like that. And they're things that will continue to grow in popularity. What does it mean? It means that the media member, the figurehead, the opinion leader works for his audience. So if the audience says, we want you to do investigative journalism for this stuff, we want you to comment on these particular types of issues with this type of philosophy, the audience will get what it pays for. Instead, right now, they work for the ratings, which allow them to sell to advertisers, and then the advertisers basically control. So they have a band of what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say, and they have to live in that little bubble there. So the incentives are all wrong. We need a direct relationship with our audience, and that means we need open systems to do that. And then over time, we can create bounties and incentives. Like here's one example of investigative journalism that is just extraordinary to me, absolutely extraordinary to me that no one has done it. So there is great evidence that's brewing from different sources through the periphery, not the mainstream media, that coronavirus could have been designed, or at the very least came from, a lab. And we would know which lab it came from. The Wuhan lab that was a major virological research center, probably also a bioweapons center. But the CCP will never be honest about that. Now, you'd say this disease has shut down the whole world. It's caused all this death, all this chaos. It's hurt all of us. And everybody knows somebody who's either lost somebody, lost a business, or had some tragedy as a direct result of coronavirus. So the origins of this thing ought to be one of the sexiest, most important studied stories ever. And in my country, the media seems to think that it's perfectly acceptable for the time being to just take direct quotes from the Communist Party of China as canon and say that's truth, and anything that deviates from that is not. When they have every single incentive to lie about the origins of this, they will never be honest. It's like Baghdad Bob. The tanks aren't in Baghdad. They just will never be honest. They don't have to be. It's their mandate not to be. So why? Well, some cynical people think that's because, well, if it's a China virus, China killed 100,000 Americans, not Trump. So let's just let it be the Trump virus until November. Then it can be the China virus and we can do something about it. Or maybe we don't want war with China. Or maybe we have Chinese ownership of our company, so we're not allowed to say anything. It's why the maps look a certain way with the NBA. And it's why Disney says certain things in really curious ways. Okay, money talks. So this tells you that there's something fundamentally broken with the way that we curate information, the way that our platforms for distributing information work. And at any time, any person who has an inconvenient opinion can be censored. So fixing the media is not going to be simple. You have to change the incentives. You have to change the relationship between the content producers and the people who consume the content. And you have to make sure that the rails that ship the content are free and fair. And this is a war that's going to have profound implications. If we lose it, everything you see will be seen through a ministry of information. If not public, it will be private and curated in a way where the experience you get is an experience that someone else has decided is the experience you should get. Not the experience you've decided for yourself, not the information you've decided for yourself. Someone else has decided what's true and false. Someone else has decided what is real, what's not real, what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what should be censored, what should not be censored, and then given that to you, and that's the only thing you're allowed to see. That is antithetical to everything I stand for and my country was founded on. And every single time in human history, we have attempted to give this power to a governing structure. They have abused it and misused it to preserve their power and silence their critics. There are no exceptions you can find in the long run, every single time. And now we live in a day where the tools can be automated, and they can be deployed at a scale that we have never seen before in human history. It is one of the biggest moral imperatives of the 21st century that we solve this problem, and we do not allow this problem to persist. One of the biggest moral imperatives. And if we do not solve it, we will live in 1984. Absolutely will live. If you doubt me, you have to look no further than these protests that have recently happened in the United States. Wherever you sit on Black Lives Matter, it's a separate issue. If you are a medical professional, an epidemiologist, a health professional, and you say that it's a bad deal to have large groups of people clustered together with limited protective equipment for long periods of time, because not only will they contract whatever disease is affecting society, they will go home and spread it to their family members, in many cases the most weak and vulnerable amongst us, and then at the same time have that opinion, and then say, but when they do it for the things I politically agree with, that's okay. You have left the realm of science, you have left the realm of argumentation and reason, and you've entered the realm of propaganda. It is okay to do the things that are beneficial to my views and my party and my view of reality. It is not okay to do the exact same thing, but opposite of what I view as right. That's no longer science. Science doesn't work that way. It's not like saying, when gravity is convenient to me, I will accept gravity. And when gravity is inconvenient, like when I'm falling off the mountain, I will no longer accept gravity and float away. You don't get that choice. And similarly, medicine doesn't work that way. There's no virus in the history of humanity that is a woke virus that says, I philosophically agree with what these protesters are protesting about, so I'm not going to infect them, their friends, and their family. Okay, why is this relevant? It's relevant because over 1,200 medical professionals and public health people signed a letter saying that they don't want these protests to stop, citing coronavirus, that it's okay for them to continue. They said the exact opposite for other protests. So other protests are a public health risk and must be stopped with force if necessary. The protests we agree with must continue. Okay, that's propaganda. And it has no place in reasoned society. It has no place with people who assert to be representing the public good. And the problem is that if you control all the media, if you control all the information, it's like that episode where Picard gets tortured by the Cardassians, and they keep asking him, are there 4 lights or 5 lights? And he keeps saying there's 4 lights. And the Cardassian says it's wrong, it's 5, and electrocutes him. And at the end of the episode, he admits that if he really wanted him to, he could see 5 lights because he had been broken. This is where we'll go if these things are controlled for too long. Because the cost and consequences of not agreeing with there being 5 lights are that you become a pariah in society. You're outed. You can't get a job. You can't get an education. You can't get a good, meaningful relationship. You're the other, the discontent. So you have to be super, super, super careful with where this goes. And I'm seeing definitely the symptoms of 1984 seeping their way in with trigger language like hate speech and this, and we have to do what's right, and fake news and fact checking. And this is not a partisan issue. Both parties seem to be doing this. And this is not even a left-right thing. There's many different kinds of political parties all throughout the world. America, we tend to be bipolar, or one or the other, but in other countries you can have a much more plurality. It doesn't matter if there's 5 ruling parties, 10. There's an overall trend with the powerful to use the distribution, curation, creation of content in a way to basically, before it gets to you, the consumer, make sure that you get it packaged in the way that they want it to. And if you oppose it, then you're a conspiracy theorist, a bad person, a disgusting person. Super, 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 super dangerous. One of the greatest dangers of the 21st century, right up there with existential threats like AI and other things. It's super dangerous, more dangerous than nuclear weapons. And by the way, cryptocurrencies, it's going to be a huge component. There will be a Facebook replacement and a Twitter replacement and a Reddit replacement and a YouTube replacement that comes out of the cryptocurrency world with a token associated with it. It will happen within the next 10 years. I'd love to see these things somehow related to Cardano. That'd be great. But everybody's trying. And some are making some significant progress, like Brave with Bats, very significant. And we will continue to see rapid growth in that industry until somebody has a breakthrough and becomes a legitimate contender to toppling. And that is the thing that's going to provoke the single largest fight. Money certainly does provoke somewhat of a fight, but governments, for the most part, can find ways to deal with it and control it. The flow of information, if it's not controlled, is the most terrifying thing in the world to governments. You don't cut a man's tongue out unless you're afraid of what he has to say. And they're going to try to cut all our tongues out if they can. And by the way, if you're looking for businesses, if you can find a way to do it, you can be the next Mark Zuckerberg. You can definitely get very rich building a new way of distributing content. Charles, are you still hoping to put out some of the best practice guidelines, wallet password, crypto security? When would you hope to release this? It'll be released, Mike, as a Udemy course, and we will get that out on in due course. Charles Morgan is the one who's going to create that. It's just we've been a little busy with the launch of Shelli, but it's a priority. I care a lot about the safe use of wallets, and I'd like to wait for hardware wallets to be available with Daedalus, because then we can do a one-stop shop. Charles, did you win the 5K for naming Dan's book, Bilzerian's book? It was fun. I couldn't resist that one, guys. I saw him with this girl on his leg and a bikini and the guns on the desk, and he's like, I wrote this book in a few days and $5,000 if you can title it. So those of you who don't know, I tweeted back, dances with herpes. And the tweet kind of blew up a little bit. But there are just some people out there, and they carefully sculpt this image of what they think an alpha strong male should be, like a good guy, like the macho guy to live up to. How incredibly empty is that lifestyle? People love you because you have money. Okay. And that's it. So when you go to bed, you know that everybody around you is not there because they legitimately care and like you. They're only there because of the things you can do for them. Even if you can make that illusion last a long time, you will be as lonely as they come. Absolutely lonely. I got a lot of love in my life. I'm surrounded by it, from the animals on the farm to friends and family. And I know that each and every person in my life, because a lot of them were in my life before I had anything. I was quite poor, lived off $1,000 a month. They were there at that time. They're still here, and they treat me no differently. So that is not a role model to look up to if that's the only thing you bring to the table. And if you want to look for a real man, well, then pick a real man like Jocko Willink. He's a good man, but he's also a man's man. I mean, it's like running Navy SEAL commandos in Ramadi. That's not an easy thing to do. Yet, despite the fact that he's so lethal, one of the nicest, most humble, kindest, gentlest people you'll ever meet. That's true power, having the ability to harm people, but not having to do that. The world is incredibly shallow and empty. No, it's not. It's quite the opposite. The world's magical and has depth you could not begin to imagine. Every single person alive today really is no different from the people that were alive during the times of Rome. In fact, if you took a baby today and you had it raised by Roman parents, it would grow up speaking Latin and looking like the Romans and having the same perspectives as them and fit in perfectly fine in that society. And if you took a Roman baby, raised him today, they would look no different than you or me. So what does it mean? It means that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of years of unique history and perspectives and brilliance, most of which is lost, but some can be discovered and is hidden. And if you want, you can spend a lifetime, multiple lifetimes, indulging in that, soaking in it, getting wisdom from it. And that's in itself something that has profound depth. The other thing is that people are genuinely good. And I've seen people do things that are unbelievably difficult, yet somehow they did them for the greater good of society. I'll tell this story. I've told it a few times, but it's a good story. So I went to Rwanda not too long ago, and I had the fortune to visit the Genocide Museum in Kigali. And the Genocide Museum is quite an interesting experience. It's a very difficult experience, especially the kids' room up on the second floor. But the thing that really blew me away is I had a bodyguard with me while I was going around Africa, and his name was Brave, big, tall guy, lived up to his name. And he was friends with the guy at the front desk, and the guy at the front desk was Tutsi. And anyway, we went there right around lunchtime, and so the guy at front desk started having lunch with another person who was Hutu, and I found out only later that basically that one had killed the other's wife and kids. So you have these two people together 20 years after the Holocaust there, 1.5 million people die, and one of them murdered the wife and kids of the other. Just think about that for a moment. And they're now together working in the same place, a monument to that event and the horrors of that event, getting along with each other. So I just, once I found it out, I said I had to ask. So I asked him, why are you friends? How could you let that go on? And he said, well, if I keep the grudge, it'll happen again. And so for the sake of everyone's children and for the country, we just have to forgive and move on. I don't really think if someone killed my mom and dad, my brother, wife and kids, I could ever move on and forgive. I'm not that big of a person. Yet in that country, in that place, a random person I've never met before, never saw, you'd never think, you'd probably look at him just like anybody else walking down the street, was so strong that he had the ability to do that and grow beyond that because he understood the consequences of not being able to do that. And it wasn't just him, it was his country. Every single person in that country had to move on, or else it would be endless chaos and war. Look at Palestine and Israel. They always have legitimate grievances. There's always going to be blood on both sides. Yet this is one of those rare cases where people were so evolved that they could set these differences aside. We can't seem to do that in the United States right now. We're still talking about slavery. Yes, it was horrible. It's the original sin of our country, but it was a long time ago. And this is an event where most of the people in that country are still alive from when that event happened. They have direct people who were impacted, but they could move on and find a way to make it work, find a way to forgive and have society be healed. So no, this world is not empty, and it's not filled with despair and chaos and badness and cynicism. That's something that some French existentialists will tell you in a freshman college philosophy class. Life is shit, smoke the cigarette. They can go fuck themselves. They haven't lived life, and they haven't seen life, and they haven't seen the things I've seen. I have seen people do these things, and they weren't academic. They were profound. And if average people can find the courage to do that, all of us can do that. And one day we all will. The wisdom gap will be filled. The empathy gap will be filled. We'll get to the next level of society. Yeah, Vancouver is a very cool place. Are Hong Kong politics going to affect IOHK? No, because we moved the company to Wyoming. It's IOG. We'll do a rebranding at some point. Was your background always in computer science? It was never in computer science directly. I studied a lot of computer science and took a lot of computer science courses, but I studied primarily mathematics. That was my background. Mathematics created computer science, and so they're kind of related to each other. Like math is the father or mother, if you will, of computer science. And if you want to be a computer scientist with as a mathematician, it's quite easy to do that. But you tend to do different computer science when you come from a mathematician's perspective. It's much more academic. You like weird things like functional programming and dependent types and proof systems, and you think less and less about practical things. Hey, Charles, is there a distribution schedule for what's published in 13.8 billion ADA not in circulation? Yeah, it's on the original Cardano docs website, but we're redoing all of that so it's more readable, understandable. But I think it's 20 or 30 years. I don't remember the exact schedule for it, but it'll be released with the new documentation at the end of the month. What branch of mathematics did I study? I studied analytic number theory. Wasn't particularly good at it. But I don't think anybody's good at analytic number theory. That's why nobody ever solves anything. Well, there's one guy, that's Terry Tao. He's pretty good at it. Rutan was pretty good too. He was a good analyst. Can you explain your solution to spikes of dishonest majority? Yeah, we have a paper coming out called SCATS, and this is like scope creep paper. We keep getting more and more scope creep, where we started with like, let's think about Ouroboros, and then we're like, how about proof of work as well? And let's do a formal analysis of Byzantine fault-tolerant protocols as well. It'd be like a grand unified theory of spikes of dishonest majority. So I don't know. They're kind of overdoing it, but it's this Agilos's thing. He's going to do his thing, and Agilos going to Agilos. And I love him. We love him. And of course, the papers are always amazing, and they're super fun to read. Yeah, I really do believe that it's going to be one of the finest papers we've ever published. And it's really the last mile of the research agenda. We kind of had to understand what the ledgers should look like and, what should be the formal model of security. And then we had to understand how clocks work and synchronization works and how to do adaptive security and what primitives to use like VRFs and, these types of things to be able to handle the randomness and what's too dirty versus just right. But you always had this spike of dishonest majority problem, which is just always there with proof of stake protocols, and generally resolve that with checkpoints and manual intervention. That's the naive way of doing it. And then suddenly we have a more elegant way of looking at it in a more generic way for all of these protocols. That was incredibly satisfying to hear that we actually had some interesting things to say on that problem that are going to be very meaningful for all proof of stake protocols. So I'm quite impressed, but it will take a long time to get all this damn stuff done. It's been months already. It'll be months more. This is just how these guys work, because it does deserve that much time. It's a foundational thing for everybody. Would you move to Wyoming? No, I'm a Coloradan. I live in Colorado. I'm an hour out of Wyoming. If I need to go there, I drive there. It's easy. Do you think mathematical objects actually exist, or are they just useful figments? Yeah, are they useful fictions? It's kind of like what Richard Feynman was asked, what color is a shadow? And if you ask a physicist that, they give you a very elaborate answer. You ask a mathematician, does math exist? You know, the point of mathematics and the parts of your brain that tend to turn on and light up when you're thinking about math are just the frontal lobe, but also the areas responsible for language. So does language exist? Like, does the word the exist? So does 5 exist? So if 5 exists, why does the not exist? These are kind of interesting concepts to mull over. Then you have all of these other constructs which are emergent from mathematical reasoning. You build a formal system. So you have axioms. You say, these are my rules. Okay, this and this and this must be true. I'm not going to prove it. I'm just going to assume that they are true. Okay. And then you have operators. You have logics, intentional and quantificational logic. So you have things like conjunction and disjunction. So and or, implication, by implication, negation. And then you have quantification, like for all there exists, these types of constructs. They allow you to reason around. Then you, of course, have to have things in your world, right? So you have sets, and you say, okay, is something a member of this set or not? And then you have to have tests to decide membership inside those sets. Then you start reasoning about rules about that, and then you start realizing that you need other objects like classes in addition to sets, or else you run into paradoxes. And then you ask, well, should your system even be consistent? And should your system be independent and decidable? Should you be able to mechanistically prove things in your system, or some things in the system cannot be proved within the system? Okay, so there's this whole question about what makes a good formal system. Mathematics lives in that realm. It's just a specific case of that type of thinking. You can build different systems of math. You can go and change all the rules and make them internally consistent, independent. We did that for geometry. You had Euclidean geometry, and Hilbert went and rebuilt it. Built a new formulation of geometry that was a bit more elegant and precise. You can build complete systems. You can prove your systems are complete, meaning that everything that you'd want to prove in the system, you can prove. And then general mathematics are not complete. This is actually a very famous result called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. And no matter what you do, you just can't prove everything. There's this inductive axiom requirement. And it's really fascinating how that's done. So are these real or not? Well, if I can arbitrarily construct them, then they're no more real than the characters in a screenplay. But those characters in a screenplay, if we choose to collectively believe in them, become so real that they materialize into television dramas. And then an actor plays it, a human being, a real life flesh and blood, becomes Daenerys Targaryen. So is it real at that point? Like if the number 5 is so relevant and important to society that it ends up becoming flesh and blood, or we build a monument to it, like we build monuments to Zeus, does that become real? It's an interesting thing to think about, and it's a great philosophical question of, is math real or not? There are some mathematicians, they're in the extreme minority, who are skeptical if infinity is really a viable concept or not. And it turns out that you can actually do calculus without infinity. It turns out you can do a lot of things in mathematics without the requirement of infinity. It's a little bit more difficult, but non-standard analysis does exist. And so you don't even need infinity for the most part to do these things. Just most mathematicians would say that we'd like having it around, because it makes a lot of things more simple. Similarly, there's a lot of calculations you do without complex numbers, but having them around actually makes it a lot easier to do certain things, especially in electrical engineering and nonlinear dynamics. To answer your question, I don't know, but I think the answer is no. But that's just an opinion, man. No, I don't remember a game called Legends of the Red Dragon. I remember Dragon Quest. Those were interesting games. Game development is such an amazing thing. People tend to scoff at it, be like, you're a game developer. Bah. Like movies are so much better, or, so much more meaningful. You know, the last time I went to a movie theater before this plague cowled all of us, shut all of them down, gal to the left of me was on her cell phone while the movie was playing. The guy to the right of me, I went alone, was on his cell phone while the movie was playing. And I'm just thinking to myself, they spent millions of dollars and all this time to put this amazing narrative together to have you experience it. And you're so divorced from being able to just relax, enjoy, and watch something that you're on your cell phone while the movie is playing because you need to be somewhere else and you're only half paying attention to the movie. So that storytelling medium is compromised because the consumers of that storytelling medium are no longer capable of giving it its due. A storyteller is only as effective as the audience. There's a reciprocal relationship. It's not good enough just to be a good storyteller. You have to have a good audience, and they have to be in it. They have to be in the moment. They have to be experiencing it with you. I love good storytellers. So game developers are the last bastion of effective storytelling we have because the people who play games are absorbed in the games. They're in the moment. They're there. They're in flow. They're focused on them. They care about the characters. Kratos isn't just a character in God of War. Kratos is like something people connect to, relate to. A great example would be in Red Dead Redemption 2, when the protagonist gets tuberculosis. You're playing this character. About a quarter of the way through the game, you go from Dutch's orders to go and rough somebody up to get some money back. He coughs on you, you get tuberculosis from it. And throughout the game, you get sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker until your player character dies of it. There were legitimate people who actually talked to psychologists after this because it's so traumatized and bothered them having this person die that they took it like a death in the family. Think about that. You can't tell me that storytelling hasn't evolved in that form if people have that kind of emotional reaction to something. So in essence, video games are that last medium that you have to actually be able to tell a story in a way that has that kind of impact on people. You can imagine thousands of years ago, before we were all perpetually distracted, Homer, the blind bard in Greece, telling people about the Odyssey and Odysseus and these things, and probably had that level of passion with his audience. We have somehow managed to resurrect Homer in a digital medium and give that one more time to people in such a beautiful and forgiving medium, and a broad and vast medium. And I tell you, some of the best days I've had when I've gotten off from work and I finally finished all the Cardano work for the day are just sitting down and with my notebook and my pen, the same ones that I used to create Cardano, start writing out the plot for the game I bought, Legends of Valar. There's the enhanced edition. We got to fix it up. And I bought a whole book on game mechanics. And I bought another whole book on magic systems and these things like that. It's like a whole academic analysis of all the different systems, just so I can get an understanding of how do you actually balance these things. And, what should you think about? Like, should you have environmental effects like air and water and these things, and you can drown or dehydrate or starve to death? Can you like go into a vacuum chamber, run out of air and die, or poison gas? And can the environment be influenced by the player? Basic game mechanic questions you have to ask. But then at the end of the day, like, what story do you want to tell? What do you want people to feel? What emotions do you want them to have? Do you want them to care about the characters? I mean, I sure as hell cared about some game characters from video games I played in the past, so much so that I sometimes would buy action figures of them or, things like that. People cosplay these characters, and every year they go back to them year after year. I'd like to be able to create something that has that kind of fervor and delight and love. And it's really inspiring to be able to do that. And I haven't felt that same inspiration since the days I was doing mathematics, but it's much more free and open, and you have more tools at your disposal. Yeah, Last of Us is another great example. Very strong emotional connections. People cried in that game. A lot of people cried because of Last of Us. All right, let's get to the next question. Charles, can you please tell us your opinions about Monero? I mean, a Fluffy Pony and I run into each other from time to time. Seems like a pretty good, reasonable ecosystem. I don't have any major issues with it. They do their thing. They claim to be private. They have some papers. They implement some stuff. And I haven't thought too much about them. I'll probably have a stronger opinion if I ever enter the privacy coin space, and then I'll be like, "Oh well, this is what they're doing wrong, and here's what you need to do to fix that." But at the moment, I like that people are actually trying to do things, whether they be Zcash or Monero or Zencash and so forth. Hi, Charles. Who pays for the next phase of development? The community by fundraising or some magic pot somewhere? It's going to be done via the Treasury system. So we might as well build a really good Treasury system, and then we can answer your question for you. What do you think of using Godot for potentially creating Legends of Valar? I'm probably going to use Babylon JS for the remake, for the enhanced edition, just because it'll be fast to market and cross-platform, and a game of that design would be good to do. And we'll probably make that open source. And then for the actual remake, I'll probably use a AAA game engine and make it a AAA title. So I'll put a large sum of money into it, probably greater than $5 million. And we'll use something like Unreal 5. Yeah, I mean, I like Godot, but the problem is just Unreal and Unity and these other engines are orders of magnitude more capable, and they come with so many batteries included. Yeah. Walking Dead season 1, Two Tail Games. Yeah, that was another one. Clementine. Oh my God. So well written. So well written. It's like you cry when he dies. Do you envision web browsers running on the blockchain? I think that's one of those mash of two concepts that don't fit so well together. It's not peanut butter and jelly, it's oil and water. You don't really need blockchain and web browsers together. Web browser is a consumer of protocols. And so certainly blockchains can add value into the conversation. Just a second, got to check something. So basically, you can certainly add value by having blockchain as elements. And actually, this would be something we'll probably talk about with the panel with Vince Cerf at the summit. So you add value by saying, well, decentralized DNS and a decentralized way of managing root of trust. And so you have different way of handling certificates and authorization for access control. And then also you can talk about a content addressable network as opposed to an IP addressable network, where instead of saying I go to locations, I look for files. This is a very different world. So right now, if you're looking for a picture, you have to remember, what website did I see that picture on? And if you don't, you go to Google and you try to enter enough search words to get to that website that you think would have it. Okay. But in a content addressable network, you take the hash of that file, some representation of that file, and then you search the graph for that thing. So whenever you want to save anything, you can just save the index for that particular representation. It's a very different way of looking at the world. You're kind of used to this with torrents. So, when you want to download a torrent, you have your torrent file, you find that, and that gives you the instructions to reconstruct it and where it's located and these things. And you can verify that the file you're getting hasn't been tampered with. So it's there's a lot of different ways to do things. Web browsers can be a consumer of that. And probably the most sophisticated web browser at the moment to live in that intersection between the blockchain world and emerging web technologies is Brave. They're doing a really good job. Michael Lesser, are you going to make me a villain in your new game? Michael, there was a doctor in Legends of Valar, and I will make you that doctor. I will name the doctor Michael Lesser. Congratulations, you have just became a character in the game. I will even model him on you. So You are now a video game character. Congratulations. You've earned it. I'm not even joking. I'm 100% serious. And I will pay you a small royalty for that. I will send you $1. Charles, you watched the Colbert Report with James Colbert? No, guy's a douchebag. Why would I want to pollute my mind with a show that is just Trump bad, everything left good, Trump bad, everything left good, Trump bad, Republican bad, everything left good, or the vice versa? Why would you want to watch a show Trump good, everything left bad, Trump good, everything left bad? It's like, can you imagine like seriously sitting down and listening to Rush Limbaugh day after day, 3 hours a day? Just ask yourself, like, what have you gained? Let's say you believe everything the dude is saying. You've left with a hatred of a group of people, and that's it. You haven't learned anything new. Can you go start a fire? Can you go plant a tree? Can you run a greenhouse? Can you perform surgery? Have you bettered yourself in some way? Has it made you a better listener? Are you better at interacting with people? Are you better at your job? Do you have more capacity to make money? All these shows exist to make you hate other people because there's money and power to be made by making you hate other people. They peddle fear, uncertainty, disinformation, propaganda techniques, and they create an other, whoever that other is going to be. Name your favorite group, or I guess least favorite group, and then there you go. They can use any catchphrase they want: borders, language, culture. They can use "Make America Great Again." They can use social justice. They're just phrases, and they attach emotion to them. And the proper way of using them is to hate whoever they're targeted at. As long as you hate them, you're a good member of that group. You get to be a ditto head or whatever they call you. So no, I don't watch any of that. It's garbage. It's junk. It rots your brain. It destroys you. You know what? You want to try an experiment. Turn off the television for a week and just read a biography. Somebody. Ulysses S. Grant, Abraham Lincoln, somebody, Susan B. Anthony. Pick your favorite person. Pick a person that you just want to know more about, randomly maybe. Maybe a foreign figure, okay, like a Mao or something, controversial or not. Just read it. Ron Chernow is a great writer, and see what that does to you. And you know what is going to happen if you can if you can participate with a family in these things. If you have a wife or a husband or something, read it to them in bed. Say, tonight we're just not going to watch TV. I'm going to grab my Kindle or my book, and I'm just going to read for an hour to you. And you just be amazed what happens after 1 week. You have a conversation. You're engaged. You're actually saying, well, wow, what's going to happen in this person's life? I did that with the George Washington biography that Ron Chernow wrote. He was one of the most fascinating people I've ever read about. I learned about Washington in school, in K through 12 and in university. And it was quite academic. Yeah, he did this and this, and he was at these battles, and he did this and that, and blah, blah. But I never got the real story about Sally Fairfax and his relationship with his brother and watching his brother die of tuberculosis and going to Barbados and just all of this stuff that was extraordinary. And you just got this amazing three-dimensional person. And at the end of all of it, there was a relatability there. Washington wasn't born as a paragon of men. In fact, it was quite the opposite. He was defined more by his failures than by his successes and his lack of opportunity. He should have been a general in the British Army. They should have brought him into the ranks of the aristocracy. And had they done that, he would have never fought on the revolutionary side. He would have actually been the opposite. Instead, they did everything they could to diminish and demean him to a point where they turned potentially one of their greatest assets into their greatest enemy. He built a nation on the back of that. That's a great story. So turn the TV off, turn Colbert off, turn all these guys off. They're noise, they're nobodies, they're nothing if you don't watch them. It's like that Simpsons episode with the advertisements that are killing people. Just don't look, just don't look, just don't look. And buy a book, read it, and read it to a friend, read it to your wife, read it to somebody. You'll be closer, you'll have better relationship, better conversations, and you'll want to finish it. And then once you do that, you know what you do? Do the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And sometimes you just randomly pick people out. And then you start talking to each other about books. And you find other people that do that too. And you become a great student of history. And then you start looking at things that happen in their life, which you can use in your own life. And then that wisdom gap closes. and life gets better. I'm related to Ulysses S. Grant. Charles, what a story. Ulysses S. Grant is one of the greatest American heroes we have and one of the greatest presidents we had. And he was defined just like Washington in terms of his failures as much as his successes. When the Revolutionary War started, Civil War started, he was already kicked out of the army for alcoholism, and his rank was captain. And within just a few years, he ascended to the rank of general of the army. And then in 1868 became president. It was an extraordinary story and really an interesting guy to look to. Do you still think Biden will be coherent in November? If he's elected, he'll be the oldest president in U.S. history. I think 78 or 79, very old. And he's not in good health. Anybody tells you otherwise is a partisan. I'm just listening to him for 10 minutes. He's showing signs of dementia, and it's just sad. It really, truly is sad. There were some decent people in that lineup, Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, and you can agree with them or hate them, but you could at least admit that they were bringing something fresh and new to the conversation. And the best they can do is get a guy who's been around for politics for 50 years. 8 of the last 12 years was the number 2 guy in the administration. And that's change. That's going to fix everything. It's going to make everything great and better. It's going to manage the restless youth and really relate to people and connect to people. Whoever becomes president next has a huge task of healing the country and bringing people back together, or doing the opposite of taking short-term wins to further divide people for power. It will take a figure of stature of Ulysses S. Grant to bring people back together. People say this is the worst it's ever been. That's asinine. The end of the Civil War is the worst it ever was. We literally killed 500,000 of our fellow brethren shooting at each other, and the country was cleaved in two. Don't tell me that that was somehow a better situation and less charged than the situation that we live in today. But it took a man like Ulysses S. Grant to really start stitching things back together. And by the way, his predecessor, Andrew Johnson, was a monster. He was a horrible president, the worst president the country ever had. I don't care where you sit and you think Trump is bad. You're propagandized if you believe that he is worse than Johnson was. Johnson was truly the worst that we ever had. So not only do we have the war, we had horrifically bad leadership post-Lincoln, and then a guy had to come in and just clean it all up. See, it was tough. Charles, could you please talk about what sets Hydra apart in terms of sharding? It sets it apart because it doesn't shard. It's a layer 2 protocol, and that's the power of these things. You want to do 2 things at the same time. You want to have a path that if you have to shard the ledger itself, you can do that in a very explicit or implicit way. Implicit is sidechains, explicit is what Eth2 is trying to do, where they actually have multiple ledgers and they're all interoperable and communicating with each other and spun up and down. Then you have to have a system where you can gracefully take transactions, batch them, and run them off-chain outside of the system. And that's what Lightning does and what Hydra is aspiring to do and so forth. They are complementary. So you can do both at the same time. The advantage of any level 2 solution is it does not require a soft and hard fork for Cardano. And the stake pool operators can run these channels, and they're already trusted to be operators, so they can reuse their pledge and bonds and these things to basically facilitate the state channels. So we get that for free. It's low-hanging fruit. You can have competitiveness in the implementation. It gives you a path to a DEX. It gives you a path to interchain interoperability, and it can scale to millions of transactions per second if you want to do that. Brain dead obvious, low cost, super high return, and you leverage years of prior results and research for these things. In terms of ledger sharding, super complicated. The security of your system scales down to a third to a quarter. You have to introduce a lot of usually trusted centralized infrastructure to bootstrap it or create fail-safes as you're getting the system out. And Byzantine behavior dramatically reduces the performance of the system, dramatically. So when everybody's honest, the system is probably very fast. When you have an event, the system slows down. That's why Ghost and Phantom and these other DAG protocols didn't work out the way that people intended. So it's not all it's made up to be, and you get massive complexity creep into the system. So if you have two options, one is saying, I can easily add this on, it fits my consensus model, I don't have to shard the base ledger, and I get so much great stuff from it, and it's low cost, high return. Or the other, I can go and have to do 5 years of research and figure a bunch of stuff out like F2, super complicated, easy to get things wrong, and I lose security embracing it. And the end result is both systems will have equivalent performance, probably better performance in the single shard system, because you can optimize the base ledger and segregate transactions accordingly. I would say Hydra is much better. It's much easier. It's much lower hanging fruit. And that's what you get when you have good system architects, good scientists, and a respect for the past. When you're in love with your own ideas, you get caught in a cycle of groupthink over and over and over and over and over and over again. Then at the end of the day, you end up in a really bad position where you just double down and embrace basically concepts that are counterproductive for being able to build sustainable ecosystems. So we wish everybody who's doing this ledger-based sharding well, but I think it's not the right time to do that. We need another 3 to 5 years of foundational research to get to a point where it's very promising. And there are certainly a lot of great approaches. Some people send me proposals from prominent universities asking for funding for their approaches. And every now and then I get super tempted to pursue it because they're legitimately good at angles. But let's not lie to ourselves. There's years worth of homework that has to be done, and the dog is going to eat it more than once. Hydra is ready to go in terms of concepts and in terms of theory. It's easy to understand, it's easy to layer on, and it fits our topology quite well. And you can implement it through a series of competing teams, building competing clients, so you get client diversity, and you can implement it in the sub-$1 million level for a lot of these proof of concepts, and in the $5 million level for a finished end-to-end product. That's your complexity class, your cost class, and that means you can have multiple bets, and then you can add more and more features like a DEX and interoperability and with Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these types of things with that type of a system. Makes a lot more sense. Gradual escalation. Don't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. By the way, my videos are always released under a Creative Commons license, so feel free to cut them up, repost them, do whatever you guys want to do with them. I don't ever make money from IP. It's not my game. Just tell people that where you got it from, and obviously don't edit them so that I appear like I'm saying something that I'm not. Yes, Ulysses S. Grant, a slave owner. Ulysses S. Grant never had slaves. Try again. Completely wrong. He actually married a woman who had slaves, and he let them go. He was against slavery from the very beginning. He thought it was abhorrent. So amazing that people are so willing to completely destroy figures in history. If they don't meet up to today's standards, then they're just horrible human beings forever, and they should be forgotten, and there's no wisdom to be derived there. Just remember that if that's the standard, when it changes again, all of us will be horrible human beings for future standards. What if we decide that animals have human rights, and so everybody who ate a steak is a murderer? Could happen in 100 years. And then I guess we're all murderers, and everybody should tear our statues down. Society changes. Are you scared of deepfakes? Deepfakes have the potential to shatter society. Again, with the control of the news, it's very tempting to use that technology to edit people's comments to make them appear that they've said things they didn't say. We already see this happening, and people have caught MSNBC and CNN and other people with their hand in the cookie jar, selectively editing things to make it look like somebody said the opposite of what they said. Really dangerous if you can make it look like they said something and people believe that because it's such a convincing fake. Really, really, really terrifying. And then how do you fake it? Because people say, well, I didn't say it. And they say, well, I can see it. Nobody believes it. Reality is getting malleable. And you see, this is where people have been so propagandized. But certainly Fox would never do that. Sure, I probably have. Just because I pick on CNN, MSNBC, doesn't think that the right doesn't do its own things. See, you're so programmed that if you criticize one particular source, it implies that you endorse the other. That is propaganda thinking. Liberate yourself, free from yourself. Nuance exists in society. Nothing is polar. There's no one side or the other side. There is just objective reality and not objective reality. And the people who want to control you, the first victim on the pyre of control is objectivity. They want to convince you there's no such meaning as objective truth. Everything's relative. And at that point, it's perfectly fine for scientists to say, if you protest one way, you won't catch a virus. If you protest another way, another cause, you will. Because reality is no longer objective. It's malleable. Truth is just based on opinion, subjective experience. Reality is just made up in our own mind. Drist series, Drist Stewart and was it R.A. Salvatore wrote those? That's an oldie. Japanese A5 Wagyu for the win. Dry aged even better. I will give you that. There are some amazing steaks in Japan. One time I was at a hotel in Tokyo and I went to the restaurant and I had just come in from Korea. I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. I was with my secretary at the time. It was Josh Miller. And Josh and I were just getting some steaks. And I was just from Korea. So I read it and it said 60,000 yen. And I was thinking won. I'm like, oh, $60 for a steak. Not bad. Okay. So I got two, one for him, one for me. The bill comes in and it's, 120,000 yen. And I'm like, wait a minute, this looks like it's too much. This should be $120. And it's like, oh my God, that was a $600 steak. What have I done? And I was like, $1,200 for this thing. And of course, they very sheepishly, in a Japanese way, silently put the check down and slide the bill over. And I said, okay, I guess I have to buy this. That was probably the most expensive steak I ever bought in my life. It was a pretty good steak, but it was not a $600 steak. I never made that mistake again. Be very careful with your currency conversions, especially when you go from Korea to Japan. Sometimes when you're tired, your mind just doesn't work properly. So you're a math guy. Thoughts on Eric Weinstein's theory of everything? I'm not a physicist. I'm not qualified to have an opinion on that. And that was his whole point when he was talking about his theory of everything, geometric unity. It's so far outside of my scope of concern and study. It'd take me 5 years to understand what the hell he's talking about. And the only thing I can do is just say, hey, do I like the guy? Do I think he's reasonable? Sure, he's pretty smart. I like Stephen Wolfram too, and he's got his own theory of everything, So I can just have faith in people, believe in people, but I can't tell you what's heads or tails. Yeah, great point on the truth is objective. I just finished Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, and where he stresses this point. Yeah, and his whole point is about narratives too. Wrote that Chaos book back in the 90s. And 12 Rules was kind of his spiritual successor that was dumbed down and made it a little bit easier to understand. So it was a non-academic book. But yeah, he's absolutely right. There is objective reality. And even if there isn't, it's in all of our best interest to declare that there is one. Mathematics only works because we all agree that the rules are the way that they are. And then we can build things assuming that those rules hold. And we can, of course, decide if those rules are reasonable or not by looking if they have internal inconsistencies or so forth. But at the end of the day, you have to have consensus about things. And at some point, you have to have consensus, like who owns Microsoft? Who owns the house? These are abstractions. But we as a society need to agree to them and be absolute in those agreements for society to be well-ordered and functioning. If anybody's trying to disrupt or destroy society, the first thing that they do is they attack the concept of truth. And if they can get enough people on board with that, you have chaos, absolute chaos. That's why the Russians use internet propaganda. They don't have a horse to ride. Instead, they're using asymmetrical warfare to make people not believe anything. Because if they don't believe anything, then the authority figures, the government just can't operate. It slows everything down, makes everything more expensive. It's basically the equivalent of a digital landmine that they're laying, an information landmine, a meme landmine. Like, for example, this cop who kneeled and killed the African-American, George, when he was arrested, everyone on the internet saying, oh, well, the guy who was arrested in the mugshots don't match the police officer. I mean, just think of the levels of conspiratorial thinking you have to get yourself into to think that somehow the person who gets arrested for the murder is not the person who committed the murder. It's like, how do you even reconcile? Because the mugshot doesn't seem to look 100% right compared to what you see there. So people are, I don't know about that. It's because our whole concept of trust and truth and objectivity is so damaged that we're starting to distrust everything we see. And if anything looks a little off, maybe the angle is not quite right, we just start saying, oh, no, that's not right. It's not true. It's not reality. This is because of where we're at. All the fake news, the platform wars, Russian trolls, this, that, and the other. There's a war on truth and objectivity, and nobody trusts anything. So we just kind of have to think for ourselves and figure stuff out. And the problem is that our thinking tools are atrophied. If you ever really want to get some good skills on that, Dan Dennett is a great author. And he writes all these wonderful books on building cognitive tools, intuition pumps, and all these other things to give you a way of structuredly thinking about the world around you. The amazing Randy, the skeptic Randy, the magician who's a professional skeptic, as another example. I believe he's written some stuff too, but he makes great videos on these things. He's pretty old now. I think he's in his 90s, but maybe he's dead. I haven't looked him up in a few years. But another example of that. There are ways to think where you can actually, if you're given all this weird information, kind of sort things out and kind of figure out what the truth actually is, or at least a reasonable approximation of it. But those skills are purposefully destroyed or atrophied by the public education system, by the media, by propagandists, by consumer advertising, for good reason. Because if you don't have those skills, you are incapable of thinking for yourself. So basically, it's just a game of getting you into a bucket, and then they can put something in your head, and then they can control you. Whoever they is, they can be a corporation, they can be a government, a political party, a cult, a religion, whatever it might be. There's a whole bunch of people shopping for people to follow them. Okay. And the least popular people in the world like this are the people who like objective truth and the people who build and refine skills to sort things out, because they never tell you what you want to hear. They never tell you the things that are satisfying, and they often don't give you a complete answer to anything. They use words like, it depends, and that's nuanced, and, well, that situation's a little complicated, or there are many confounding factors, or we don't entirely know, and we're not exactly sure. They tell you things like that, and people just don't want to listen to that guy. They want to listen to the other guy who says, this is what happened. This group of people, this conspiracy, this thing is the result of that. Look at the cryptocurrency space. I have, for my entire career in this industry, told you guys over and over again, trade-offs, complexity, science, peer review. It's going to take years. This is going to take effort. We're 3 years out here, 5 years out here. No one has a solution for this yet. You cannot solve this problem. Or if you want to solve it, you have to accept a trade-off that's not satisfying. Then my competitors, many cases, are saying 500,000 transactions per second. We've solved decentralization. Look how amazing we are. We know everything. We figured out everything. We're quantum this, and this, and this, and this. Buzz term, buzz term, buzz term, buzz term. It is so unsatisfying to listen to me talk, because I'm basically saying, we got work to do. Y'all have to grab some shovels and move forward and do stuff. You listen to these other guys talk, and they're like, You get everything. I'm going to cure cancer, give you a blowjob, make you so happy. Life is going to be great for you. Just give me your money and I'll take care of everything else. And then when they don't deliver, no, I delivered. Or, well, there's this reason, or this is why I can't work, or they just disappear. Meanwhile, I'm the guy for 5 years, been around writing papers, doing stuff, writing code. And everybody says, when Shelli? We're shipping a product of its time. And it shipped exactly when it needed to ship, no sooner, no later, because it's finally ready. And we're proud of it. And we know it's going to do the job we claim. No more, no less, the job we claim. And it's the first cryptocurrency that can truly do that. It took 5 years of some of the brightest people in the world working together for year after year tirelessly towards that end. Many setbacks along the way. Not easy. And maybe a better team or a more organized team could have gotten it a few months earlier. But let's be honest here, it would have been 2 years earlier. We just couldn't get it done. There was too much complexity in hindsight, too many things to think about in hindsight, too many efforts to try to simplify things that needed to be simplified in order for the system to be sustainable and stable. And we got there. It was hard. And we tried every bit of the way. And every bit of the way, we were basically said, we're horrible human beings. We're scammers. We don't know what we're doing. You're just a wallet. You're just bad people. And our competition made unlimited claims. And everybody said their stuff will be ready tomorrow. And now it's not here. Steam gets taken over. This happens. That happens. You see? So the truth is not sexy. Objective reality is not sexy. It's not sexy selling hard work. It's not sexy telling you the things you don't want to hear. But would you rather have the doctor that tells you you're fine or the doctor that tells you you actually do have cancer? You might not want to hear that, but you need to so that you can figure out what to do about it. And similarly, would you rather have people around that tell you the truth, no matter how much it hurts and how objective it might be, and it cuts in all ways, or would you like the people lie to you and tell you sweet little lies? And you get what you deserve. That's like for a good one to end it on. Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. I agree with that. Thank you for being a sponsor of Zuri Hack 2020. I love Zuri Hack. It's good to be a sponsor. It's best Civ game, Civ 5. Civ 6 is weird. Yeah. You like Verso. It's a beautiful painting, isn't it? Did I get the Command & Conquer remake? No. I haven't had time for games for a while. Have you talked with Ron Paul lately? I have not. You know, Carol is also such a wonderful person. She makes such great cookies. Ron is getting old. I love that man. I truly do. But his son has really taken over a lot. And and for good reason. Rand is everything that Ron aspired to be. And I'm very proud of Rand. I think that he's a perfect successor to his dad. Yeah, bad perm. No comment on the hair. I can't comment on hair, guys. Come on now. Come on, give me a good question to end on. Okay, guys, here's the thing about price. If you keep talking about price in my AMAs, I'm going to stop doing my AMAs. So that's that. So it's up to you. I have no desire or inclination. Who the hell knows? A whale could be exiting, could be a random event, could be market manipulation, could be portfolio reallocation for somebody. Nobody knows. I don't know. I don't care to know. And I'm not going to talk about it. So you keep asking about price. I'm going to stop doing the AMAs. I'll probably have a happy middle ground where I have the admins just erase all price related comments. And if they keep going on, then you know what? I'll find another way to talk to the community. Maybe I'll have you guys ask questions ahead of time in Reddit, and I'll have the ones that aren't price related switched out. But if you want a live AMA, don't ask about price. It's something I don't care about. I have no control over and is ephemeral to the moment. If somebody was watching this 5 years from now, would they care about the price that it was today? Did it matter if you're watching some historical film on Bitcoin that was made 5 years ago? Do you particularly care that Bitcoin was at $1,100 that day? Come on, I'm in this to build stuff and make things great. If you're in this to get rich, go to a different channel. There are plenty of people who talk about that, and that's their entire reason to exist. And you can go and sell your ADA when it gets to a high point. And if you made a profit, go buy something nice with it, and then convince yourself you're real smart, and you'll still be a slave to the very system I'm attempting to liberate you from. Okay? If that's the meaning of your life, and that's what you aspire for, and you think you're a big human being because you got lucky or you think you're smart and you made a little bit of money off this magic thing called crypto, you have completely missed the entire point of the life work of many people in our industry. And I'm sad for you because you're the very same people that are chaining yourselves to desks to basically be slaves for the rest of time. If that's the life you want to live, if those are your priorities, I don't have any time for you. I really don't. My life is much better without you even thinking about your existence. Charles, the Painting of List of You, is that by John William Waterhouse? It is a Waterhouse. It's from 1910, I think. I can't remember the exact date, but somewhere right there in the turn of the century. Would you ever collaborate again with Vitalik Buterin? I don't think so. Vitalik, he just has a different way of doing things, and we work very differently. We think about the world very differently. We prioritize things very differently. He's quite obsessed with never dying and never growing old. I think he's even donated to life extension tech. We just look at the world very differently. I like him as a person, and I think that he's a fundamentally good human being. And I think that he will continue to do great things. And the people who follow him will be rewarded for that loyalty. But because we think differently, we do things differently, I don't think we can collaborate productively. Sometimes Paul McCartney has to break up from John Lennon, and they can both go on and do stuff. Is Pickle Rick the peak of comedy? I don't know. That Vat of Acid episode was pretty fucking amazing. I like the African masks in the back of the wall. Are they legit from African tribes? Yeah, actually, it's a Ghanaian mask, the circular one. The central mask is a Nordic one. Then I have Venetian masks and a Celtic mask and some Nepalese masks. I have masks from all over the world. Okay. One question to end it. What should we have? CU or CSU, who's your team? I was a Buffalo, guys. CU Boulder. I went there. Unfortunately, during the Hawkins era. So we didn't have a good time. But yes, we always beat CSU. Go CU. Mm-hmm. Looking for that one good question to end it. Sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. Favorite color is black. We like crypto, Mom. Come on, give me something good. Okay, guys. Not seeing anything I really like. Okay. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody. It's a lot of fun. I always enjoy these talks. 2 hours, we get to go through a bunch of stuff, anything you guys want. Sometimes Cardano, sometimes something else. But you're a great community, and I do have a lot of fun. Sorry about being so snarky about the price. It's just that it's just, it adds no value to anything, and it's really nothing we can talk about. And I'm as qualified as anybody else to understand why these things go up and down. We have good days, we have bad days. Some days are bad days, some days are good days. I've been through many of them because I've been in this space a long time. The best days are the days when you actually accomplish something. You build something that's never been built before. You inspire people and you make people believe that they actually can take control of their own lives. And you see them do that. Small steps, but meaningful ones. And 1,000 small, meaningful steps turn into quite a journey. So that's what we ought to focus on. And that's the point of things that I do. And if you don't like those, well, as I've mentioned, there's plenty of people in the world that talk differently, and they'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. And you'll wake up one day and realize you're in the same place. and you won't have anybody there because the ones that listen to the other guys, they are somewhere else. Until next time, my friends, cheers.